let's rap a little bit about nutrition, because I get asked all the time, what should my macros be? How do I do macros? What are macros? And I've got to tell you, the bottom line is there are no magic numbers to macros. So as much as I wish I could ask you what your height is and what your weight is and what your activity looks like and your genetics and your metabolism and give you that magic number, I can't. So all those things I just listed go into account when you're thinking about macros. So what that means is that I don't know for sure what your macros should be. However, consistency is key. Consistency is more important than the macro numbers you choose. Why? Because it doesn't matter what numbers you choose for your macros. If you aren't consistent day to day, you're not going to know how those numbers work. You might pick great macro numbers that are going to give you results, but if you're taking a cheat meal every day or you're skipping meals here and there, you don't really know if they're working or not. So my suggestion to everybody is always choose a macro number. Maybe you start off with 200 grams protein. Maybe you start off with 150 grams of carbs, 90 grams of fat, whatever they are. I'm not saying do that. Stick to that for a week, 2 weeks. Don't veer from the plan. Stick to it to a T. See how it works and then make adjustments from there. The second part of that is as far as what your macro percentages should be. That again depends on all these different factors. How are you training? So there's a big difference in the carb count that somebody who is weight training very intensely versus somebody who's not working out at all. The person not working out at all really doesn't need nearly as many carbs as the person who's training hard almost every day. And so that's another thing you have to take into consideration is everybody's activity is different and their bodies are different. And so some people thrive on keto. Some people get their bodies to a state of ketosis and they're actually able to build muscle and lose weight using keto. Other people, they don't have that discipline to stick to keto diet and get their bodies in that state of ketosis. And so anytime they digest carbs, it throws them out of that ketosis state. So that's the other thing is you got to figure out what does your body need. And the last thing I'll point out that goes into organizing your macros is to think about what is manageable for me. So it's funny because some people will come and they'll say, you're not going to make me eat chicken and rice every day, every meal, are you? And I always ask, I'm like, if I told you to eat chicken and rice every single meal, would you be able to do it? And their eyes get real big and they go, no. So clearly for a person like that, eating chicken and rice every meal is not manageable. But then you might have another person that comes in and says, I don't care about the taste of food. I want to get on stage. I want to do a show. What do I need to do? So they're a machine. That person might be able to eat chicken and rice every meal. I'm not saying I would do that to somebody, and I'm not saying anybody should do that, but what I'm saying is that's the difference between personality types and where we are in our journeys. So don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10, okay? Just because Lucy beside you is over here nailing her macros and eating the cleanest food sources you can find doesn't mean that you need to be on that level. If you're just getting started, you might be in damage control mode. It might be a matter of taking out 2 desserts a week. You know, if you're having dessert every night, I don't expect you to be able to jump from that to jump to a full-blown bodybuilder's meal plan. That's just not mentally healthy. So think honestly about where you are, okay? So those are the main points I'm covering in this video. Now I'm going to give you a couple tools for breaking up your macros. Change of scenery first because it's very nice outside and it's hard to stay inside today. So one tool that you can use to determine what your macros should be set at, and to be honest, this is the tool that I consider the most helpful, is you can log your food for 2 days. Log everything you eat and drink, and then determine how many calories do you typically take in a day. Go ahead, get that number, and then from there, use that number moving forward to divvy up the appropriate macros. So use a pen and paper for this. First of all, what you have to think about is there is 4 calories in 1 gram of protein. There's 4 calories in 1 gram of protein. There are 4 calories in 1 gram of carbohydrates. Then there are 9 calories in 1 gram of fat. So that's why you need to be careful with fats. They're very dense. For every gram of fat, you're getting 9 calories. So you can imagine if you're looking at, say you've been taking in 2,000 calories a day. How do you divvy those up? Like, how much of those calories should come from protein? How much should come from carbs? How much should come from fat? Again, it goes back to, what is your metabolism like? What is your activity like? Genetics, all of that goes into account. So if you're really wanting to take this to the next level, using a coach to make those adjustments and guide you really might be helpful. So I'm just kind of wrapping on some basic understanding here. What I would do typically, just generally speaking, is set it at 40% protein, 40% carbohydrates, 20% fats. That's for a person who is training regularly. For a person who's a little more sedentary, I would do a little higher percentage of fat. So that's what I'm going to leave that as. There's all kinds of tricks. I personally say keep your protein really high for a couple reasons. One, it is the building block. I mean, it helps to synthesize your nutrients that you take in. So that means when you're eating your carbs and your fats, it's helping you metabolize that a lot easier. It also helps build muscle, which if you're training almost every day, chances are you want to have some muscle, keeping in mind that the more lean muscle you have on your body, the more calories you're just burning when you're sitting around at a rested state. So muscles are good. And then the last thing I want to point out is protein has the highest thermic effect on your body. So what I mean by that is when you're consuming protein, you're burning more calories than when you're consuming carbs or fat. That's another reason why I am an advocate for high protein diets. Also great for hormone regulation, for energy, and for stress hormones and negating the negative side effects of those. So there's a lot of things that proteins are very helpful for, so I do recommend a high protein diet. Whole food is always better. That's another little nugget I'm going to throw in there. So that's just a very general overview of how you can break up your macros. Now I want to touch on something else. If you're just getting started, or maybe you've been trying for a while and you cannot stick to macros, you might need to start with damage control. Seriously, you might need to just give yourself limits each day. This is how I started. I didn't start by using MyFitnessPal. I didn't start by writing down all my food and tracking everything. I started with damage control. What I did is little tricks, like I switched to 0 sugar soda. I put any sugar I had in the day right after my workout. I limited my cheat meals to 2 a week. These little tools can control getting out of control. So again, don't judge your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 10. If you're just starting this, chances are you don't need to go haywire obsessing about macros. Just get in the habit to start good habits. So for example, maybe have 5 rules for yourself for the next 4 weeks. 1, make the majority of what you eat protein, whole food protein. Number 2, drink at least 5 liters of water a day, maybe 4 liters, whatever your size is. And these are just examples. I'm not saying you have to do this. Maybe the 3rd one is you limit yourself to 1 cheat meal a week where you go off the rails or you go to a buffet or whatever, depending on what your habits are this far. Maybe the 4th one is, you stay under a certain amount of sugar per day. And then, maybe the 5th one is you work out for at least an hour a day. Meet yourself where you are. Don't be lazy about it. Don't try to cut corners, but be realistic about what you can do. Otherwise, you're going to experience burnout, you're going to get discouraged, and you're going to think that you don't have what it takes. And you do, but you have to start where you're at. Don't jump in too hard and then get discouraged. All right. A couple more things I want to point out. I have made videos on this YouTube channel. One is what and how to eat So leave a comment below if you're interested in seeing that YouTube video. I'll go ahead and attach the link for you. The other one is how to control a sweet tooth. And I'm not going to tell you by not eating sweets. That's not realistic for someone who has a big sweet tooth who eats sweets all the time. What I do instead is I provide you with a list of recipes that are sweets, but they're not going to hold you back. So they don't have sugar in them. So that's the other thing. I'm happy to provide those links if you would like, or you can just go to my YouTube channel and do some scrolling and find them, because you might come across some other videos that are pretty helpful for you. And so what I want to say is, once you get a plan going, you've got your nutrition structured, you know what you're trying to achieve each day, what you want to put in your body each day. Give it a couple weeks for your body to adjust. I'm not saying force feed yourself, but if you don't see results in a week, don't stress. It takes time for your body to get used to stuff. The other thing is, when you start a diet plan, you're going to be eating during times that you're not that hungry, and you're going to be not eating at times that you are hungry. And that's because you're taking the rope back. You're not letting your body control what you do. You are getting back in control of your body. So you are teaching your body how to consume energy, aka food. You're teaching it how to use it appropriately. For example, you really want to pack your nutrients around your workout. So you might not feel like eating after your workout. I usually don't. It makes me feel kind of sick to think about sometimes. But I do it anyway, because that hour after your workout is such an important window for muscle growth. So you want to get some protein and carbs in during that time. If you can, you want to get the bulk of your protein and carbs in at that time. So that's just one example of how you're going to have to eat when you're not hungry. But in the long run, it's going to help your metabolism. Because the more often you eat, the more clean food you can have in your diet, the better you're going to look, the more muscle you're going to put on, which means that's the more calories you're going to burn at a resting state. You're going to feel stronger, you're going to have more energy, and your body's not going to be in starvation mode. That's the other thing, is most of us, when we get stressed or we get overworked, we don't eat. We skip meals. I can't tell you the number of times a lady has said to me, "You might be surprised, but I actually don't eat enough." I'm like, no, almost everybody doesn't eat enough. So you have to be very intentional about your meals. Another thing I want to say about damage control versus being in a more structured macro plan is, if you are used to eating out for every meal, asking you to meal prep, package all your meals, and eat 5 meals a day might be overwhelming. So what you can do instead is take a look at the restaurants you go to. Be real with yourself. Am I going to go to this restaurant 3 times a week? And if there's nothing good on the menu, choose a different restaurant. What you do is plan ahead. Plan what you're going to order at that restaurant. Have a game plan so you don't kick yourself in the butt. And so you don't sabotage your goals. It's okay to eat out. It is, especially if you're used to eating out a lot. Take it one step at a time. So find something clean on that menu. Have a plan to order that when you get there. That's an example. Now, if you're used to doing macros, you have no excuse. Package your meals. Meal prep doesn't have to take all day. At first, it might feel like it does, but you're going to move past that if you stick with it. And I have another YouTube video on here. If you're interested, I can drop you the link. And it talks about how meal prep won't always take all day. And I give some really practical tips that make it a lot easier and make it a lot quicker, so you're not in the kitchen all day long. Final point, and then I'm going to stop talking. At first, you're going to try to find things that you like to eat. You're going to try to create this meal plan that is what you like to eat all the time. And what you'll find is, if you put a whole lot of variety in there and you put a whole lot of options on there, and you're looking at all these restaurants, you're looking at all these products, you are going to feel overwhelmed. So it's actually a lot easier to keep it simple. Kind of like when you track macros in an app sometimes, you might get to the end of the day and realize you still have 100 grams of protein left. How are you going to get all those in at nighttime? And you start doing crazy stuff. I had a friend one time that used to put olive oil in his cereal because he realized that he had missed some of his fats for the day. You'll start doing weird stuff like that if you're only using an app and you're just trying to hit numbers in the app. Your food's going to be all over the place, and you're going to be thinking about food all the time. So let me tell you, if you write out what your meals are, maybe give yourself a couple options for each meal. I promise you that is going to save you a lot of headspace and a lot of time in the long run. You're not going to be sitting there and thinking about food constantly. You're going to have a meal plan, and it's going to relieve a lot of stress because you're not going to have to think about it all day. Pick 2 days a week, meal prep for 30 minutes, and then you don't have to think about food. You just eat it. It's there. You eat it when it's time. So just know it's actually a lot easier to have a specific meal plan written out with measurements, with what you have to eat, than it is to try to hit macros on an app every day. Because again, you're going to be all over the place. What I recommend is if you're all over the place already with your food, maybe start with doing that. Just get familiar with what macros are, with how much you can eat, what you need to be eating. And then once you realize that's a pain in the butt and you're ready to step it up and start meal prepping and have a structured meal plan, go ahead, get your macros and write out specific meals for each part of the day. Give yourself options if you need to, but I promise you, meal planning won't always take forever. Macros will not always be overwhelming, and you're going to get to a point where this doesn't feel weird and it doesn't feel hard. It's just your default. All right? If I can do it with my sweet tooth, lack of discipline self, you can sure as hell do it. All right? Power up, people.